You may find yourself along in your career where you're told, give me something inspirational. Well, is that something I should color? Is it a statue or a sculpture? Is it a soliloquy or awkward podcast thing that you post on the internet? I don't know. Hello, and welcome to Enter the Nebula, episode 14. Today we're going to talk about ambiguity, and more specifically, how to handle ambiguous requests as you progress in your career and as you hand out ambiguous requests as leaders. So, to start, I want to use a coloring analogy. We've all colored by numbers and use those coloring books. That's really what I look at what work is like earlier in your career. You're given a coloring book, the pictures are already in there, there's numbers where you put the colors. And as a junior analyst or as someone who's just starting in your career field, you paint or color the numbers where they go. And then the picture turns out you turned into your boss. It's fairly simple. As you progress, now we're starting to see maybe the numbers go away. The picture's still there, the book's still given to you, but they're trusting the experience that you gained while coloring by numbers to fill out the picture and use the appropriate colors. Maybe you start to learn how to blend colors together and shade the right way, but you're still coloring within the general lines and you're still in the book that was given to you. You progress even further in your career, maybe you're just given a book of blank pages and told, hey, color, fill it out. And you have to take into account, well, who am I coloring for? What kind of pictures do they like? And so now you're gathering some requirements, but you're still coloring based on specific direction that's given to you. Now's when ambiguity starts to come in. But even further, you may find yourself along in your career where you're told, give me something inspirational. Well, is that something I should color? Is it a statue or a sculpture? Is it a soliloquy or awkward podcast thing that you post on the internet? I don't know, but that's where dealing with ambiguity starts. And I've read lots of articles and I've read some posts, and people continue to say that Lean Six Sigma is dead. I say nay, because there's a reason the DMAIC process was developed. And I think that there's no better process to apply when dealing with ambiguous requests than the DMAIC process. And I think as leaders and as employees, both in business and in technology, we can use the DMAIC process. Now, I think partly why you'll read some articles and hear some people say that Lean Six Sigma is dying, because the rigidness or very formal way that the DMAIC process was originally ran, starting at Toyota and moving into more manufacturing type companies, is because that requires very rigid type process. But if you don't work in those industries and you sit a bunch of leaders down and you ask them to fill out a fishbone diagram, 3 minutes in, people are going to be on their phones and laptops working on something else because it's just too formal. But as an individual who's been given an ambiguous request, the first thing you should do is define it. What am I thinking about? What problem are we trying to solve? And how do we know we're going to solve the problem or that it's being addressed? But by measuring things, right? So identifying what are our key performance indicators, our KPIs, our data points that we're going to measure to see what's our baseline and what are we growing into. Once we've defined that, now we can start to analyze things, right? And so you can see that way of thinking is still applicable as leaders in business and technology, and it's a great way to approach an ambiguous request. The next thing that you should do is really understand the rules of engagement with your leadership or whoever's making the request, because there are times where you're going to have full autonomy. Hey, do this thing, implement it, no problems. I don't want to hear about it until it's done, and whatever. But that's usually not the case. Usually you're going to have some sort of leadership who wants some kind of a check-in, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or maybe before implementation, to say, hey, here's what we saw, here's what we found, here's some cost savings, here's some improvements, and here's our proposed solution. What do you think? But you got to define that, because you want to make sure that while you are working under an ambiguous direction, and your boss probably doesn't want you, or your leader doesn't want you checking in every hour to make sure you're doing the right thing, you do want to make sure that they're on board before moving forward. And then, really, as you implement it, check to make sure that it's doing what you wanted it to do, right? So making sure that you're not only just implementing it and walking away, you're implementing it and watching it and making sure that it is in fact yielding the results that you wanted it to. And finally, as leaders, it's important we do two things when giving ambiguous direction, in my opinion. The first is, it's good to acknowledge it. Hey, I need you to do X. And I know that I'm not giving you very specific instructions here. But part of the reason I am is because I want to know what you think. I want you to use your brain and your skills and experience to go find out what different solutions there are. Back to the coloring book, right? I don't want to tell you what to color in this scenario, because then I could just give it to one of the more junior folks, and they could just color it exactly how I want them to. I want to use your experience, your expertise, your intelligence to come up with a picture that maybe I hadn't thought of, right? So it's important to set that expectation that, hey, yes, I know I'm giving you an ambiguous request, but I'm doing it on purpose. And then here are the ground rules, right? Finally, that's what we're looking for. Here are the ground rules. I want you to do this, but I want you to check in with me every quarter. Or I want you to do this, but before you implement it, I want a run through of what we're going to do and what we can expect. And then you're setting whoever you're asking for this ambiguous request up for success. You don't want to set people up for failure, right? So I think that's where we really, as leaders, can be specific, set people up for success. And if the people you're asking for don't know the DMAIC process or how to think about these things, maybe a little bit of guidance is there, right? So maybe you're not totally taking the coloring book away. Maybe you're giving them a coloring book with a couple images, and you're growing them into being able to handle a super ambiguous type request. But I think as leaders, as we get further along in our careers, it's great to think about that, because more and more of the requests and challenges that we're going to be facing are ambiguous and aren't given really the answers to the questions. It's our jobs to go find them, right? And that's where it gets really fun and exciting and empowering as professionals. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to check out our website, intellectualnebula.com, and fill out a contact form to see if I can help you or your organization. We're also now on all of the socials, so check out our YouTube channel, X, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok to follow for content and tips and tricks. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time.